This is Apotheosis, the official podcast of the Production Designers Collective. I'm your host, Alexander Whittenberg. Thanks for tuning in to the fourth episode of our ongoing sub-series, Apotheosis Notes from the Field. Today, we're joined by production designer Andrea Purcigliotti, whose credits span a wide range of comedy and reality television projects, including Everybody's Live with John Mulaney, The Real Housewives of New York City, and Saturday Night Live, where she's served as a production designer for the film unit for the past 13 years. Today, we'll get a glimpse into what it takes to bring her designs from script to reality in just 2 days. As you listen, please keep in mind that these conversations are recorded in a nomadic and remote space, which may lead to inconsistencies in quality, but we'll always do our best to deliver a great listening experience. If you've been enjoying Apotheosis, please take a moment to subscribe, rate the podcast, and share with those who might also enjoy the show. And now, here's my conversation with Andrea Purcigliotti. Andrea, thank you so much for being here. I want to start our conversation the way I always do by asking, what does creativity mean to you?
That's such a loaded and difficult question because, the artist in me has a different answer than the production designer. And, it's funny how obviously you need one to do the other.
Yeah.
But I think creativity for me is just the intrinsic need to make something beautiful that tells a story. That's the broad answer. But I think that's real. I think the art, like I said, the artist in me would have felt like that was a demand. It's required in order to make work. And I think the energy of creativity, I also believe if it's not exercised, it can become destructive. It can become self-destructive. I know so many artists that never figured out how to make that work for them. And there's that difficult path that, a lot of people find themselves on.
Absolutely. So what is it that started you on the artistic path? Take us back to your early inspirations, when you kind of decided that something in the creative field was going to be the trajectory you followed in life.
I'm not sure that it was a conscious decision. I've always been I was a fruitcake of a kid. I grew up in upstate New York, very rural, where I was from. Not a lot of people my age. I went to Catholic school. All those things don't bode well for creative kids. First generation Italian American parents that, where they were the first to have a college education. My mom could become a teacher, a nurse, or, a secretary. Those were her options. So, she became a teacher. She met my dad, who was a school teacher. Growing up, my creativity was embraced. Thank God it wasn't stifled. But, I was told when I didn't show promise in too many other areas that, the word that they used in the 70s and 80s was, a commercial artist. You're going to become a commercial artist. What the hell does that mean? But commerce is attached to that. So it doesn't,
Yes.
It's the opposite of starving artist, right? It means that you're able to sustain your life and lifestyle off of making money from your art. So, I was fortunate enough to, get into FIT as an illustration major, which was, fairly competitive. You had to do a portfolio review, etc. And even with my small town Catholic school portfolio, I was able to get in. But I also believe that as a young person, I would have probably benefited from either being able to catch up to my peers because I was the youngest in my class. So maybe a gap year, what they call now, didn't exist then. But, I think going right from high school into, college, university setting for me was not the best. Because by the time I was 19, I had an illustration degree. Being at a school like FIT where, you're in there with a lot of the world and people that are really, really great artists. And I wasn't a great artist. I clearly saw that there was a deficit there. And I said, well, let me pivot. And I tried fashion design with a focus on accessories. So I was making shoes and handbags and belts and, millinery. So that was great because, the two skills that came out of, my state university education was idea, two-dimensional sketch drawing, developed into, the higher forms of that. And then with fashion design in the realm, I was able to now make a three-dimensional object out of an idea, so those are things very much in use in production design. And, being able to sew is a great skill set.
Just making something in general, right? Bringing it from concept to reality.
Yeah, 100%. So not, neither one of those industries got pursued. I mean, also I have to note that, I'm 55 years old. I was the last generation of kids to learn analog methods of, commercial art. There was no such thing as digital photography. I think Adobe Illustrator was just literally in its infancy stages. We didn't have a computer lab at FIT at that point. So, mechanical paste up was how we learned, the, the graphic design, trades and
So analog Photoshop.
Yeah, marker rendering was a thing. So, that's what I learned. And, also knowing that this was completely arcane, useless information by the time I entered the workplace. So, there was a couple things working against me. And then also like New York City in the late 80s. There was a lot of fun to be had. And so
what a time.
I was focused, if you will. On being in the workplace. So, I was running around with a lot of people in the street art and graffiti scene. I was going to nightclubs. I was having quite a bit of fun. So, the workplace, didn't become very important for me until, I was in my mid-20s. And what ended up happening was technology, life, time, it all passed. And I'm in my mid-20s and I really don't have much going on. I'm not making art. I'm not being creative. I'm not doing anything, that other than, a hedonistic, fun New York City lifestyle. And it was time to grow up. And I took all of my credits and I threw them at SUNY Albany, and I was like, well, how can we tie this up into something useful? And they took me as a junior, and that was great because they had a fantastic classic fine arts program, printmaking, painting, sculpture. There was foundry there. I was going to really have an opportunity to expand my knowledge of art making, and that's exactly what I did. So I tied up my life, my degree, and, got to really broaden myself artistically. And the last year I was there, they encouraged me to enter a studio program and where we would get critiques from working artists. And, I was grappling with whether I pursue my MFA or, I enter the workplace as a working artist. I need to note that I did not even know that what I do for a living was a thing. Like I didn't know that there was a film and TV industry. I mean, I knew that that they got made and that's it. But I didn't, there was no seeing myself in that world. It was all about fine arts, and visual storytelling through paintings and murals. That was really what I was focused on.
It's amazing how many production designers I talk to who have that very same thing to say, that it just doesn't even enter the realm of possibility
Yeah.
to apply that training and those experiences to a career and a life in film and television.
Yeah.
So,
It's
yeah.
so important for me to hear those stories because as you well know, imposter syndrome is also, huge with a
Oh,
lot of
yes,
people that
it's
come up
real.
in this world. So, yeah, um, a little foreshadowing there. And how I got into the business, is pure accident or, divine intervention, luck, whatever you wanna call it. Opportunity meets hard work. I don't know.
Hmm.
Um, but basically in that independent study program, we're on 29th Street and we were next to in the building, we were next to a photography studio. And I was huge into collecting garbage and making art and sculpture out of found art and environments out of things that I would find on the streets. And New York was, fraught with wonderful garbage back then. It still is. You
Amazing.
know what I mean? If
I
you know what
love
to look.
that. Oh, there's a grit. The grit of New York City is so alive and tangible. And that's awesome that you found a way to channel that directly into your work.
Yeah, and anonymous storytelling through graffiti was so much fun. There was a lot of things fueling my work at that point, and portraiture, and using crude materials to make beautiful things. Like I loved all of that. And this photography studio used to throw flats away,
Mm.
and I would show up every week to start my week, and there was a new set of flats in all different sizes in the garbage. I'm like, "Who is throwing away these perfectly good painting surfaces? Who is
Right.
doing this? Like, why?" And then as the studio doors would open, I would see, oh, a little photo shoot going on, and oh, the model stands in front of them. Oh, they get painted to look like different things. This one looks like stone. This one looks like marble. This one looks like
Hmm.
flowers. Oh, okay, I get it now. So I was collecting flats and I was doing my paintings on them. I had an opportunity to be in a show, and I set up the flats the way I saw them set up in the studio. So pull them off the wall, jack them up. I got some work lights instead of studio lights because I didn't have access to them.
Uh-huh.
And, I called my show Setup, paintings response to the film industry or something dumb, thought I was being clever boost. But it was fun. And sure enough, a couple of art directors came to my show and they're like, "Oh, you're in the industry." And I'm like, "What industry is this you speak of?"
Hmm.
Um, and and yeah, so my first job on set was as a scenic artist, and I loved it. I thought I had fallen in poo, as they say. Like, here I'm doing something for free. I'm struggling to promote myself as an artist. You get to remove all the art speak and lingo and critical thinking out of it. And somebody hires you for a whole $300 a day to paint something pink. Yes, please. But it wasn't
Hmm.
just paint something pink. I mean, my first job was like a VH1 fashion type of show. So, you know what I mean? That there was a lot
Yeah.
of pink on that one. But, moving forward, these the people that I was working for were in a lot of those reality type MTV, Viacom, VH1 shows, and then music videos. So I got my start in those realms, and I loved it, and I loved collaborating. I think that was the first thing that I learned because there isn't a huge amount of collaboration in the fine arts.
Mm.
It's
It's
very.
true. It's
Yeah.
mostly solitary, isn't it?
It is, and it's you in your studio and your story and your storytelling, modes. What are you doing? How are you portraying it? And what do you do, especially like me, if you're not prolific? Like, see, that was my
Mm.
problem. It was like I was really struggling to find my voice. I just couldn't always connect with what it was that I wanted to say. And I also felt it to be a little bit arrogant and selfish. Like, who
Mm.
the fuck cares about my story? You know what I
Well,
mean? And
this is the contradiction of the fine artist, the struggle of it, right? Is that you want to create something that means something to you, but then to have to go out and parade it around and really make yourself the star in order to get any attention. It seems almost counterintuitive, doesn't it?
right, and then sell it huge
Yeah.
conflict of interest for me, and then also too, I'm a girl graffiti writer. I'm in the street art scene, but it's also the mid 90s, at which point there was plenty of people taking that box. There was plenty of people in the high art world doing that thing. And one of the reasons why I didn't go to grad school was a lot of the critiques that I would get was that there was a lot of rawness to my work, but as a New York artist in New York trying to break into the gallery scene, it was always suggested that I should travel to London or to Los Angeles. And you know what? I didn't have that wanderlust gene. I didn't have that risk-taking gene that a lot of people do, where you put everything that you own into a backpack and you take your $100 and you get on a bus and you end up in Los Angeles and you start from scratch, or you go to
Yeah.
a foreign
Yeah.
country and you start from scratch. No, like, you know what I mean? Like
I get that. Absolutely.
this wasn't part of my thing. So
Yeah.
finding the film business and being able to collaborate and understanding what the visual problem was that had to be solved collectively from the beginning, for me was just that was like you asked for the eureka moment. That was the eureka moment for me. I'm like, I love this, like I felt valued. I was surrounded by other fruitcakes. There were people
Yeah.
that were coming from similar stories and paths or not. They were coming from architecture or they had a film degree. And so everybody's story was new and exciting. And it was just fun to all put our heads together. And that's when I was like, "Oh, the art department is home. I found my home,"
Mm.
you know?
That's fantastic. I love that. And I relate with this idea. There's something really beautiful about so many perspectives and individuals coming from completely different backgrounds, but there's a common thread that connects everybody who finds their way to the art department. There is this sensibility that is magnetic. And yet it's so many different perspectives and viewpoints that somehow just connect in this a magical way. So I think you've articulated that so wonderfully here with that story.
Oh, well, thank you. Like, still to this day, I get to pinch myself that this is what I get to do for a living. And I always say, if I won the lottery, I wouldn't stop. Like, if I didn't need to work, I wouldn't stop because I love it. I love it so much,
That's
There's
great.
not there's not many things that I'm highly unemployable by many standards. So I'm really lucky I found this.
I want to ask you about your work in reality television because it's a realm of production design that doesn't often get talked about because there is this sense of it being reality television. Of course, if you're designing a set for a competition show or something like that,
Yeah.
of course, that's a kind of a different thing. And Saturday Night Live we'll talk about in a bit. But with reality, and especially some of your work with Bravo and the Real Housewives and stuff, I'm curious, what did your role as a production designer entail? Talk to me about kind of the scope of your involvement with that.
Sure, sure, sure. Well, so, music videos aside, moving into the reality show, but Viacom, you have to remember back then, born from the real world, there were many shows that involved throwing cast in a house. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so I learned many of my art department skills working with, uh, at the time, it was production designer Ron Norsworthy, being thrown into having to develop a cast house, starting from an empty piece of real estate. Um, and then being in the non-union realm, you know, not just scenic painting. Like I got to I got to shop and set decorate, and I got to learn all of the different departments within the art department in a non-union reality setting. um as it moves on, as the genre moves on, and it's real cinema verite and following people around in their
Yeah.
lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you need a production designer for? You don't. But what happens along the way is there's story producers, and rather than just watching people fight and bicker and be catty, you have to sort of build up their life or spin their life a bit. So, so-and-so is going to open a store, so-and-so is going to have this lavish dinner, so-and-so is going to get married, and all of that stuff needed to be designed. So, working with story producers about how the story was going to be developed and what was the visual backdrop for that was always what I was doing. So I wasn't like a on staff production designer always there. It was per project. So I knew during the season that maybe 6 or 8 times during the season I would be brought in with a team where we could build up a store for so and so, or but with Real Housewives, the fun thing about that, and it got to cross paths with SNL early on, and maybe a good way to liaise into it. So for Real Housewives of New York, I one of the things that I learned about reality was that editors go through the story of all the footage that they have for the year, and they're basically writing the story. The visual storytelling is really done in the editing suite, right? Massive holes get revealed. One of the things that I was brought early on to do was to create the testimonials or the interview segments, and that basically those segments are born from the fact that not the whole story of the particular incident that they're talking about gets camera footage. There may be a fight and they have to cut cameras, or there may be, some sort of inconvenient situation that happens and they don't always get the full story on camera, or it's so long and drawn out that they need to edit it down into, bite-sized pieces. So what the testimonial or interview segment does is it kind of tidies that up. So, Jill, tell us what happened after the fashion show when she tried to punch you in the face. And then that's when you get those really animated catty moments, and you look at the background and you think they're in their house, but they're not, because they only would have a small amount of time with these characters in a studio environment. So I used to create these 2-walled sets of what the Real Housewives homes looked like if it was 40 feet in the background, sort of blurry, beautifully lit. And of course it's Bravo. So they had like $2,000 or $3,000 for the, for each set for the budget.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, this is so hard. You're talking about women that shop for their homes. They spend thousands of dollars on their furnishings, and you're giving me $2,000 to build their
That's amazing.
sets. And oh my God, but it makes it makes you so creative, and like,
absolutely,
stenciling and spray painting furniture, and just like once I would see frame, I was like, okay, I fully understand how much leverage and leeway I have to pull this off.
And did you see a direct connection from your days of gathering garbage and creating artwork from that to basically making something out of nothing that had to feel sort of opulent and elegant? And
100%. You're like, all right, well, if I can spray paint, this chair, and in real life, it's it's this beautiful, Chesterfield or Chippendale, or what I mean, like
right,
whatever it was that I was trying to emulate. And I was like, all right, well, we're going to the Salvation Army and the Goodwill, and we are just going to look at all of these furnishings and find the right shape. As long as the shape is fine, we can do a poor man's reupholstery, or we can paint it, we can make it look like what it needs to look like. So 100%, like matching shapes and images. And also worth the mention too, so when these women would walk in and see their set, they'd be like, what the fuck is this? And it wasn't until they saw their frame and how beautifully lit and soft and furry in the background it was, that they were like, oh, I get it. So yeah, it was, we had some funny moments in reality TV along the way.
When I was a freshman at SUNY Purchase, which is where I studied set design, and I had just arrived in New York City, and the first person I really wanted to meet in New York was Eugene Lee. So I sent Eugene an email on a Friday night, and he invited me to 30 Rock the next day. And we sat in his office for 2 hours as a dress rehearsal of SNL was happening. And we had a fantastic conversation about, just his life and experiences. But SNL, it's always played a big part of my life. It's something that I really love. And what I love about it is that it seems to sort of bridge this gap between this kind of grit of New York, this kind of theatrical element, as well as something that now has a very cinematic layer as well. And I love just kind of the whole culture built up around SNL. So I'm so excited to talk to you about your experience with the show. But first, tell me, how did it come into your life, and how did you even get involved with the show to begin with?
I was a hall call. It really is that simple. It's season 35. The year is 2010. I just started working on Real Housewives of New York. The housing market tanked. Work kind of dried up quite a bit. I had an adjacent business that tanked because the housing market crashed, and it was like really kind of a horrible, desperate time. And I had to borrow some money from my parents to move back to New York and rent an apartment. And I'm like, how is this happening? I'm 39 years old, but I also knew how to survive from being an artist, and
Yeah,
learning a freelance lifestyle. Like, you have to take the good with the bad. So
that's true.
I was like, this too shall pass. One of the wonderful things about how I got into the union was, after trying to get in the union as a scenic artist, it was still very, very gatekeepy back then. I didn't have the right friends. I didn't have the right connections. I was stuck in this world of, TV that was frowned upon, and music videos very frowned upon. And one of the things that happened just prior to me getting in, work at SNL, was around 2005, 2006, a collective bargaining agreement happened with the unions to allow reality shows and music videos to be covered under a union contract. And that, for me, was just like manna from the heavens, because now all of this experience that I had was going to allow me to get into the union. But here's the thing that's crazy: was it wasn't as a scenic artist, it was as an art director. And I didn't have any formal drafting experience. I had literally only just been art directing, production designing music videos for a short portion of time, as compared to the 8 years of scenic artistry that I had under my belt. So, also fueling my imposter syndrome was I was able to get into 829. I took the test, and I asked a lot of questions, and I made sure, that the bits that I didn't know how to do, I very much appeared like I knew how to do. But I got into the union as an art director, a scenic designer. And that was great, because now I could, get union wages for the jobs that I already knew how to do. Right. So
Absolutely.
setting the
Huge.
stage for transitioning from non-union work into union work was that's what happened. But one of the things that I absolutely had to do, was go back to school and learn how to draft, and learn how to model. Those were the two things that I focused on. And I would ask a lot of questions like, what's your workflow? How does it work for you? And I always got conflicting, horses for courses, as the British say. Like, each person I would speak to would use a different methodology. And in each industry within the art department, like, if you were working on feature films, you were working in AutoCAD or Vectorworks. SketchUp was this dirty little secret that people used to toy around with, but it wasn't taken very seriously. But I kind of jumped in 2006, and started learning SketchUp, and I absolutely loved it, because, you know, um, I was working in this bizarre kind of threefold process where to get the client, I would do a really beautiful Photoshop mock-up, but useless for anything else other than to get the client, right? Then
Mm-hmm.
for me to fully understand how this was going to get made, I would model it in SketchUp. And then I would do the 2D construction draftings in Vectorworks. And so now I'm working basically 3 times for stuff that today, luckily, you don't have to do that.
Right.
So basically it's 2009. Shit has hit the fan financially, and I put my name on the availability list for 8/29, and I get a very harried phone call from my still to this day producer Dina Moles. Hi, my name is Dina. I'm a producer at SNL. We have a digital short. We need an art decorator. And I'm like, wait, what? You need an art director or set decorator?
Set decorator.
And she goes, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. When do you need me? And she's like, when can you get here? And I got on a train and I was there in 20 minutes. And that is how I got the job at SNL. And the carrying theme in this all was just that fast-paced world of reality television and music video, quick and bite-sized clips of how to tell a funny story. That really, really, like, I had that skill set already. And but to have budget money was new. And so how to be efficient in that, like, where can we get away with literal smoke mirrors, tape, and, distraction? And then where should we spend money? And that was the opportunity that SNL afforded, that muscle and production design for me to learn how to use.
That's brilliant. So I know the live show and your schedule are not dissimilar in terms of the production week.
We get a day less because our pieces have to go into post.
Crazy. So walk us through a week at SNL, if you could.
Okay, a week at SNL. So we have a pre-COVID workflow and a post-COVID workflow, and I'll just take you through generally the workflow, and then we can speak about the specific differences because it was huge.
That sounds great.
So around noon on Wednesday. Monday, Tuesday is the script building day, and that's when I don't think the cast get the host until Tuesday, and everybody sits down, they meet and greet. But that's a writing day. Mm-hmm. By Wednesday, they've put together a package that goes to table read around noon. We call it like the leaked scripts, but those are the ones that already have VT at the top of the script, meaning that it's earmarked for pre-tapes.
Okay.
And so around noon, historically I would always get a sneak peek look at what's going to possibly go to table read. By 4 o'clock, those scripts get confirmed. So somewhere between, it can be as few as like 4 and as many as 12 scripts go to table read. And film unit and the digital short unit, they merged, I would say around the time that I got there. I was offered a season-long position where I would come and oversee which pieces needed production design, because a lot of times we were shooting on location, and they had just developed into this workflow where if we're on location, we really don't need an art director. And I was called an art director initially because the production designers for the live show were still designing the pieces when I first got there. So
they were designing the pre-recorded stuff as well?
Absolutely, 100%. Yep.
Wow.
Because after table read, the cast break off into the design department. I mean, the cast and the writers break off into the design department, and they all stand there and they wait in line and they tell the designers what they need. I mean, that's why you have 4 designers, because there's so many, 15, 16 live sketches to get through, and then up, 2 to 3 pre-tape segments, as well as the little pre-tape bits that the live sketches need to liaise into, or if there's green screen beats within them, and those need to be pre-taped. So yeah, I mean, like, film unit designers were never part of the table read. We were in adjacent offices to where table read was going on, but we never sat at table read. So anyway, by Wednesday, like I said, 4:00, we know what's going to table read. Maybe around 8:00, we would start poking producers and saying, "Hey, do you have any rumors? Any, what's going on?" We used to get our picks a lot earlier, but it just over time, we're not getting picks until like 9:30, 10:00 at night on a Wednesday night.
Wow.
And, as much as we like to, as much as we even get hints that something read well, to sit down and actually start 3D modeling what the set might look like prior to getting picks tends to be an exercise in futility for a myriad of reasons. You don't know anything other than the couple of upper cap words on the script in parentheses of what it's supposed to be. Very rarely is time period or detail in those words. So it really is not proactive to start modeling before you get your picks. And so you're literally hitting the drawing board at 10:00 at night on Wednesday.
Wow.
What used to happen is, once we would get the pics and it says, interior church. Okay. So we're looking at locations. What churches are we looking at? Interior school hall. Okay. We're going to St. John's in Astoria. Where are we going on location? And I mean, the locations department used to have like a salad bar of locations for all of the scripts that they had read. And they weren't confirming the locations that we were going to actually scout them on Thursday until Wednesday at like 10, 11 o'clock at night. We would write down whether it just made sense to build a set or go to location Wednesday night. And, that meant if we were picking a location, we were going to be scouting on the better part of Thursday, which, can you imagine, we have to be there tomorrow to start shooting.
On a feature film, it's hard enough to lock a location a month in advance, let alone, hours before shooting.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Thursdays are the most harrowing. But to take you back into workflow, one of the things that changed over COVID was testing and cadence. We used to have to fight the rest of the film industry to get a soundstage if we were going to do a huge build. We're doing a Game of Thrones parody or a Star Wars parody. We need to build this all from scratch in a soundstage. And so, that design process would start 10:00 on Wednesday night. Completely harrowing to have to sit down and model and draft and get this all done by 7:00 in the morning, Thursday. That's what time I would need to go to Stiegelbauer and talk about my chicken scratch construction drawings with the foreman about what it is that we need. We used to have to do battle and fight the rest of the film industry about available spaces. Sometimes there weren't any available stages, so we'd have to shoot something in a warehouse, a non-soundproofed, freezing cold, filthy, dirty warehouse. Wherever we could get space is where we shot. So one of the things that changed, which was huge for us, was the fact that COVID happened, and now we had to basically test in to a facility and stay there. And so our producer, Dina, that summer of COVID, went and found a warehouse in Sunset Park that had 3 massive areas where the 3 possible film units could shoot their pieces concurrently during COVID. And that was a game changer for us because we could stock more scenery than we ever had before. We could stock more set dressing than we ever had before. When you have a fleeting location and a very small storage space in Greenpoint, you really have to manage what it is that you're saving. Changing the format to having a soundstage each week meant that we were able to start becoming more efficient with our design process. And that's been the key for us. Like the the past 5 years have been really incredible because, we didn't have the Sunset Park location for more than a year. We were able to take over an old ABC studios behind Lincoln Center, which had been decommissioned recently by ABC, and we took it over, and that's been our home since 2021. So yeah, super, super fortuitous for us because
Yeah.
we have our own facility. So basically by 7 a.m., I am at Stiegelbauer Associates in the Brooklyn Navy Yard.
And they build the sets for the live show too, right?
They do. Yep. This is all happening at the same time. So you have to remember, I'm designing, I'm art directing, I'm assistant art directing.
You're art decorating.
No. We have brilliant set decorators that love the madness as much as we do, and we're all partnered off. Each decorator works with their designer. I can't stress enough how much that relationship is such a part of the muscle.
Absolutely.
So anyway, one of the things that happened once we got a studio was that I needed help, and there was I would say up until around season 38 or 39, I was doing all of the film units. I was doing the digital shorts and the film unit pieces. And the most demanding one was the one that I ended up being on set for. But I would make sure that everything was set up for all of the shoots. And at a certain point, the digital shorts were becoming their own thing and evolving into more film unit pieces. Once the Lonely Island guys transitioned out. And so that's when I was able to bring in other production designers, and each unit developed its own specific team, and we ran the film unit like a production company that was running 3 different commercials or music videos at the same time. So there was a time where I was kind of doing everything, and it was really insane and crazy, and there wasn't a lot of sleeping happening. And that still very much is the case today, but it is so much more civilized because we have wonderful art directors and assistant art directors that, work alongside us.
That's brilliant. I was going to ask, if you're getting the script at 10 o'clock on Wednesday night, and then you're going to the shop at 7, and I imagine things immediately kind of go into production. Do you have a short window of time to sort of get some rest?
We start shooting on Friday at around 8 a.m. That's typical. Call time is 5 a.m. on Friday. So we get a script and we all join a Zoom call, which is amazing because we used to have to do this at 30 Rock and we don't have to anymore. So you get to work in the comfort of home and creature comforts and big computer screens and your own machine, and that to me was also life-changing because I used to have to work on somebody else's desktop, and there was no design department as you've experienced for the live show. It was 3 freelancers working on the floor sitting next to the director as the writers came in and sort of spit out what it was that they wanted. What it is now is a Zoom call, and it's a Zoom call with all the keys. And we tend to let vanities go first because they don't want to sit on a phone call about where the door is going to be for, an hour and a half. So let them go first. And what that enables us to do is go into our SketchUp 3D warehouse of SNL designs, which, we run a Google Drive format and a SketchUp design. That is our design mode of choice. That's really the fastest, best, most efficient way for us to visually storytell.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so we start pulling up models of past things, things that make sense, or starting from scratch. It depends. It really depends what the script is. And then by the time Glam Squad finishes, we can present a white model on the call, and start talking about it so we drop the white model into our sound stage and we start talking about, for example, 2 weeks ago, it was a mountaintop. That was the word in the script. Exterior mountaintop. First questions. Well, what mountains where in the world are we on this mountain? And we found out we were, in probably like the Himalayas. So that's a different landscape to say like the Rocky Mountains. The white model gives us just enough information to sort of talk about, how many sets we're going to cram into our studio this week and what they need to be. And it's on that Zoom call that we're able to share the research folders. That's I'd say the best use of time for the designers, the art directors, and the decorators as we build these research folders of each and every script. And it's just, basically images of what we think we're reading about. But yeah, when I go to the shop at 7 a.m., there's questions. What are we using from stock? What can we pull from the live show that they're not using? I have about an hour to go over with our foreman and our head carpenter. And we have our assistant art director there who's going to basically she's going to be boots on the ground in the shop for at the drop of a hat changes, which will happen because once I leave the shop, I'm driving straight to our studio and we're having a tech scout. And that is also completely bonkers to how it's done in the real world. Imagine having a tech scout the day before you're shooting and your scenery is already being built and we haven't even had rewrite yet.
Wow.
Writers have slept. Our director comes in, he's feeling a little bit more fresh or nerve-wracked and has thought up some, creative solutions to some of the problems that were left open-ended in the script. And we hit Tech Scout at 9:30, 10 a.m. on Thursday. And he's already saying things like, I think we need, I think we need the cave. We need the entire cave for the Jack Black, Jack White piece. Maybe we can make camera ports and I need to be inside shooting out of the cave and I need to shoot into the mouth of the cave. And so I'm like, okay, so we're going to do full cave then for that.
It's such an insane workflow to somehow become the norm for you, right? So from when you started with the show to now, how was that initial? And I know it was kind of different then with the digital shorts and everything, maybe not quite at the same scale as some of the productions you're doing now, but how long did it take for you to even get to a point where this is just kind of accepted as what your week looks like? I mean, was that quite a transition or did you adjust pretty immediately?
I think adaptability is the key. I think you adapt, based on what the needs are. And over time we've become, it's more civilized, it's more humane. We have a better vocabulary. We have, our crew is completely invested in the process. I think constantly evolving. It never gets comfortable. There's always periods of complete and total terror and you just feel like you're in the middle of a battle. And I think we're gluttons for punishment and we kind of love that about it. We do remark on, wow, remember how we used to do it back then. I'm always loath to share our drafting packages with people from the outside world because they look like a real television show in a coloring book, either got into a fight or had a child. You know what I mean? They're just doing things in color elevations, just answers so many questions for, and just being able to do ortho views and unplan overviews and just the way that we, communicate to our crew, and they ask for it, like, so what happens after Tech Scout is I take all of the notes, I go to my office, and I start version 2. And like, I'm probably in my office about a half an hour, and the key grip is walking by my office, and he knows not to like ask where I'm at, but just kind of wants to see where I'm at. Like, maybe if I'm printing, he'll be excited, like, oh, is that the version 2 coming out now? Or, that kind of thing. People want to know, they need the information, because, at Tech Scout, we tape out where on the floor in the studio our sets are going to be built. But then there's a lot of information that is going to be on the plans and elevations that they want to see. And, our shop is building the set as we speak. So a lot of times I'm just on the phone with our assistant art director, Gabby Nunez, and saying, "Hey, Gabby, so this, remember that bedroom that we were making? Well, it's turned into a bathroom, and I don't know how to turn this huge, like, attic loft conversion room into a bathroom just yet. But let me just put my head at it, and we'll figure something out and make it work." Or, like a huge behemoth of a room is now turning into a very small look, and that's very easy to adapt to. But, a lot of times it just, the set's already been built. So like, I try to gauge, like, should we tell Andrew not to build that room? And she's like, it's too late. It's already on a truck heading to you. So, scenery starts trickling in to the studio starting from about 2 p.m. on Thursday. And so between 2 p.m. and 9 p.m. on a Thursday, our trucks and trucks full of scenery for up to 3 film unit pieces is getting delivered to our West End studios,
Wow.
all being built by separate crews. It's pretty daunting if you think about it. And then around 5 p.m. Thursday is when the crews start to bring like construction grips. That's their call. Scenic artists. Sometimes the scenics will bring in their people a little bit earlier if we have like, real special or a detail, or we get stuff early. But yeah, the scenicking, the construction, and the set deck all starts to show up at the same time. And we have to manage space because, a forest worth of greens is going to take up a lot of space if it ends up in the wrong place. And, you don't want people double and triple handling stuff. So, the madness starts happening around Thursday dinner time. And like I said, it doesn't stop until around 5, 6, 7 a.m. Friday morning. It is literally a battle.
Wow. I got to ask about like the set decoration piece, because I'm curious where all of the furniture, dressing, props, all that is coming from. Is there a central space that Saturday Night Live has that is their stock, or is it coming from different prop houses around town that you all partner with? What does that look like?
So our set decorators are Danielle Webb and Sarah Parks. The Beast unit, which grew from the name B unit, the designer is Ken McLeod and the decorator is Kim Kachugan. And our third unit, Ann Beyersdorfer, who is one of our art directors, she will break off and take off her art director hat and put on production designer hat. And she is the designer for the third unit, and she works with Jessica Temple King. And prior to that, it was Mark Newell, and he worked with Jessica and Kim Franklin. And so, what is very steady is our relationships. Like, very rarely do we split off and work with other people within the art department pool at SNL, because our shorthand is already firmly in place, and the only time we will get to collaborate or play with others is when we get an off week piece. Very rarely we get an off week piece, or we get an integrated marketing piece, which is basically fancy word for commercial, like an SNL commercial with an outside, entity.
Yeah.
But that being said, yeah, I mean, we do business with the prop houses that will not tell us to go fly a kite. So,
Of which I imagine there are plenty.
there are plenty that do not want to deal with us, and the ones that do, we really appreciate, because they move heaven and earth to get us our stuff. Like, they literally drop everything and get us our stuff. NBC does have an asset center, which is a huge resource. The problem with it is its location. It's out, it's out in the suburbs of Long Island, and you have to send somebody because the inventory is always fluctuating. So it's not an online catalog that you can access. You have to call the stagehands there and ask them, do you have this type of period furniture? Or do you have these type of outside, uh, landscapey type things? And, and it's always fluctuating. So we try to send somebody out there to be a set of eyes, but it's not always conducive to that. So, I'd like to say that we be able to use that more, but we just really can't.
There's something that's quite amazing about the loyalty of Saturday Night Live and the people who have been there, especially like looking at, Leo and Keith and Joe, I know have been there all for a very long time, and yourself as well. And so I think there's clearly something there in that culture of Saturday Night Live that keeps people there, that sort of tribal knowledge being passed down over time. I think it's fantastic. It's really unique.
You're there because you want to be there. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, and yeah, can it be frustrating? And do you want to pull your hair out? And can it be really difficult to, and some weeks, there's the recovery time that you need from this, endurance test of design. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, sometimes it makes you question your choices, but yeah, at the end of the day, we all have a little bit of Stockholm syndrome too, and ask anyone by July of, the hiatus, August of the hiatus, you're kind of thinking about going back to work,
It's a drug, isn't it?
It is.
It's so funny because when I'm working on film or television shows, I often end up, if there's a quick turnaround, which is still nothing quite like the turnarounds on SNL, but I often find myself saying, hey, this is Saturday Night Live style. The show goes live on Saturday, whether it's ready or not. So we got to get it done. 100%. And I laugh because I'm also reminded of what Eugene Lee said when I met him so many years ago about this is summer stock Midtown on steroids. And I got to ask, do you now find a bit of comfort in the chaos?
It's all I know. And I also know from the other jobs that I do that we're ending up like the SNL business model tends to be like it's closer now more than ever in other types of television, especially commercials. You used to have 2 weeks to sit there and pontificate about the color of sheets, and and now between all of the stuff that our industry has had to face, and commercials going back to being a non-union format, there's people want Rome in a day now. It's very interesting to see what's happening. And I'm not commenting on whether that's a good or a bad thing. It is a thing, though, you know what I mean? And it has to be acknowledged. So yeah, a lot of people do actually, I do actually get a lot of calls from colleagues, which is really nice, and saying, if you had to pull this off for SNL, how would you do it? And I'm happy to share those resources because, I think anything that you could do to keep, the vendors that are willing to participate in our brand of madness afloat is, I'm happy to share that,
For sure. Something we end up talking about a lot on this podcast, and I think it's especially relevant here, is intuition and leaning on intuition and not second guessing yourself in this case because there's no time, right?
Right.
Do you find yourself often sort of refining your ability to just kind of select a color in a second based on your intuition?
100%. Yeah, I rely on intuition a lot because I'm not necessarily going to have the time to stop what I'm doing and go and ask the right questions. And then there's other times that I better stop what I'm doing and go and ask the right questions because I do not want that oh shit moment when everybody shows up on set and they're like, what is that? Like, that can't happen. So a lot of times it's great to be fast at previs because I could just bang it up in a SketchUp model and go and walk in with my laptop and force the director, like, hey, can you just look at this for a second? Because there's a couple different ways that we can do this,
Yeah.
and like your answer is going to help dictate which format we go with. So yeah, like just and I can't be precious. Like I cannot be precious. And it may take away a bit from the craft of production design, the lack of time that we have, because I can't give something the attention that it truly deserves. But we also are working in comedy, and so the hook factor may actually help the joke. And being able to see that, like, hey, if this is badly put together and you see the bits of string and tape holding this together, that might actually make this funnier, or the times, the times where we go, this is really like a post thing. And that's another mention too. Like as soon as the 3D model, version 2 of the 3D model is done, whether he needs it or not, it goes right to our David Eber, who's our charged VFX person. Like he needs to see what that model, he changes it into the format that speaks to his program, whether it's OBJ or FBX or whatever, and converts it into his world and starts taking dimensions and, designing his virtual world off of the SketchUp model. So there's an efficiency to our design process. Our DP, Lance Coons, he's super, super trusting of my choices of colors. And we vibe on enough things to understand that I'm gonna go with this, but if you have some real particular nuanced, reasons for what it is that you need, come at me. I can never be precious about some of the decisions that have to get made in the time that we have.
Yeah, that's great. The shorthand is the most valuable thing I can imagine.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about a personal favorite project you've worked on during your time at SNL. Do you have one that comes to mind, or a few?
I try to narrow it down to 4 per season, and that's the one where I feel like the trifecta, of like the writing is brilliant, and the production design lends itself to it, and then just the acting comes together and the joke is delivered. You know what I mean? Like I feel like there's that's the stick by which I measure. I also have a short-term memory loss when it comes to like I can only remember the most traumatic for the current season that I'm in. But I would have to say for season 50, it was Beppo, and that's probably because, I got to work with John Mulaney, who I was working with at that point quite closely on his show. And, just being able to work with puppetry and Monkey Boys and their beautiful model making skills and period production design, like, being able to do our version of Apollo 13. And, like, I just, that was like a warm and fuzzy feeling. And then this season, I would say, as morbid as it was, the Willy Wonka piece that we did.
Yes.
Yeah,
That
was really a lot of fun.
While we're on the topic of John Mulaney, I want to transition from New York over to LA, where you designed 2 projects with John Mulaney. And it was Everybody's Live and isn't Everybody's Here in LA?
So it took 2 different formats, and it was so funny because we didn't call it season 1 and season 2. We called it season 1 and 1.5. But yeah, one was born from the other. So it is Everybody's in LA, right? So that was the Netflix is a Joke special, which happens every 2 years, right? So we did a 6-show run live every night of the Netflix is a Joke festival. And then for last season, it became Everybody's Live with John Mulaney. So that was it branched away from being LA centric, and it became more of a talk show. But very much in the same vein of Everybody's in LA. So and that we shot once a week over the course of 12 weeks. And yeah, I mean, that was a fantastic project. I was so happy to be involved with that. I had also done his children's show called the Sack Lunch Bunch, which was
right, of course, yeah,
a few years prior to that. So yeah, it's just he's really wonderful to work with, and we're, we get to use SNL as a reference point for, how to do things, or we're definitely not going to do things the SNL way. And for John, like with last season, like one of the things that he said to me is, you just have to have eyes on the musical production design pieces. He's like, I'm happy for them to do whatever they want, but I just don't. I sometimes feel like the SNL music pieces feel disjointed when they bring somebody else in to design them, and you lose the identity of the show. He's like, I just want you to have eyes on it. And if you think it's fine, then I'm happy to do it,
Yeah.
So that was nice, and that also gave us, some leeway, and then it also gave us some parameters as well, that we could present with the musical acts, like, oh, John doesn't really want to go in that direction, and that kind of thing.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
I have to say, with the set for the talk show, it really is this kind of very elevated, a term I've heard thrown around a bit, dated warmth, in reference to that design.
His term.
That's his term. That's great. And it captures something that is so essentially LA somehow, and Saturday Night Live, something that is so essentially New York. I mean, it's two very different kind of spaces to play in. So I'm just curious what your conversations with John were like as you were sort of crafting this warm LA space for that show.
We ended up as like the building blocks. This Johnny Carson's house, this architect Ed Grimes who designed this really ostentatious house, and the hills. And we hadn't even met in person. We had just spoke by phone, and starting a research folder, back and forth. It was just John and I. And one day he sends me this link. He's like, "What about this?" And he sends me the real estate listing to this house. And I start looking at it, and I'm just like, wow, this is crazy. This is fun. But it was perfect. It was perfect in so many ways because it was easily convertible into stagecraft, right? It was like grandiose, and it had things like, that could become things in our language, in our realm, and then also become vehicles to hide equipment. And it was like a quirky shape, and yeah, and it was fun. But he knew he always wanted the music performance stage to look like something out of MTV's Unplugged. So that I was aware of, but the house came secondary. And then I just sat down and I just started playing with my model, and I started bringing all the elements into it, and just kind of feeling a way to make it work. Just in terms of the shapes itself. And there was something about there were the triangles and the big columns and stuff that we're already going to do a lot of that heavy lifting. And then the tones of the wood and some of the uses of, the set deck. It was going to be really easy. It happened quite naturally. And when I was out in LA, I set up a meeting with him, and I presented the model. and he just sat down next to me, and we were scrolling around it, and our EP was there, and he couldn't believe that like I had so much already developed for John to take a look at. But it's just the kind of way that we had worked before that made sense. And
Yeah.
he knows how to see. Like, a lot of people don't know how to look at a model, and it's hokey, cartoonish, sketch up-y phase.
Mm-hmm.
And he very much does. So, he's very, very keyed into his design, persona, and he loves art and artists.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
Oh, that's
it's like,
great.
it's really great working with him. So I presented the model. He was like, I love it. I absolutely love it. Let's run with that. So it happened really organically in the beginning. It was never a fight. And for that, I just love working with him. And then the other added bonus for me was like, I had only done a handful of music videos in Los Angeles. I was a complete, layman, green person when it came to their workflow and how stuff is done. And our EP said, I have an art director that I love to work with. And, Keith Raywood had an art director out there that he loved to work with. And it was kind of between the two of them. And I just, in my gut, I was like, I think you go with the art director that the EP likes to work with, because the financial trust is there. And this is not going to be a cheap show. This is not going to be cheap scenery. And I don't want that battle that you have to do to get things made, And then Joe Celli, who's our director for that project, is a production designer in his own right. And he's worked on a lot of live things in Los Angeles. So, and he'd worked with a lot of SNL people before. And he kind of knew what he was probably going to be dealing with. And he's been in LA for 30 years and has relationships with shops and set decorators and all of this stuff, knowing how important it was to me in my SNL workflow. I'm like, I need to find that person in Los Angeles. And I was so blessed to work with him because he made it so seamless, and just like the workflow differences of New York and LA, I never felt like I was that designer,
Absolutely. No, I know Joe's work well, and I think he's quite prolific and really brilliant. So that's awesome that you had an opportunity to work with him on this
Yeah.
show.
Yeah. Huge fan of Joe Celli.
Yeah. I want to ask you about the furniture in that show, because I know it sort of, in a sense, turned the late night talk show furniture on its head in a way. There was a difference in its shape and design that really affected the way that the guests sort of felt in the space in terms of comfort and all that. Could you speak to that?
Yeah. I mean, like, comfortably uncomfortable, I think, was like the terms that got thrown around. Like
That's great.
John specifically wanted an uncomfortable host chair. He wanted the arms to be too high. He wanted to like have to be able to like sit up and like scooch himself to the edge of the chair and lean into his, there was some really funny conversations about materials and shapes, and like the leather sofa that the guests sat on. Like, one of the first things that came up, he definitely wanted to feel leather, and I'm like, well, like, leather makes farting noises when people move around on it, and he's like, that's kind of funny to me. You know what I mean? Like, so we had really interesting
Built-in whoopee cushion.
we have really interesting conversations about the furniture, and he was very much a part of looking at our pulls and looking at our fabric choices, and really, really wanted to be involved in that, which is also fantastic. But then, very trusting of us when we wanted to bring like that brutalist element into the mix,
Yeah.
yeah, it was such a really fun design process, I have to say. I'm sad it's not coming back, but John has moved on to moved on to other things. He's touring this year, and I, he takes a British approach to things where he's like, I think you can do what you need to do in 2 or 3 seasons. I don't think we need. Let's go out on a high note. So yeah,
I love that.
We'll see what next is.
Yeah. Well, speaking of what's next, are there any types of projects or things you haven't quite worked on yet that you'd be interested in exploring in the future? Any areas of production design that excite you?
I mean, yeah, it all does, but it's like I am terrified. Like when I watch or when I listen to other production designers speak about their process, or when I look at the scope and magnitude of things that I get on a timeline that uh, I don't understand because I've never done them before. I find it to be so daunting, and like I said, that's where my imposter syndrome kicks up, because I'm you know it's so nuanced, this world that I live in, and it's so nice to be recognized, and people are very complimentary, and that's nice. And I know we've developed a really great system to how we do SNL, but it just makes me feel like a complete fraud the minute I leave anything that's fast paced. And so yeah, I find it terrifying to think about what it would be like in another world. But I know how to ask the right questions, like, you know what I mean?
Oh,
I
that's
know
huge. Yeah.
support myself with the staff that are experts in the things that I am not. I try to go at things with an air of humility and diplomacy. I love a bit of research. I love to hunker down and really learn things that I don't think I understand. Um,
Yeah. I was
so
just talking about this with my wife yesterday. I said, asking for help is underrated,
yeah, yeah,
because it's nothing to be ashamed of. In fact, it's something to be celebrated, is this desire to learn more and expand, your knowledge base. It's like that only starts from asking questions. And I think that is the key to so much.
yeah, yeah. And like SNL aside, there's something really limiting to working on talk shows. It's very formulaic. It's a set schedule. You're pushing things out on wagons. It's never, the segments are tiny. Um, it doesn't excite me after I'm there for a few months. So
Yeah.
I know that, like, the fact that I get bored and need things to be, you know, huge and fast paced, means that I might do really well on a feature. But, like I'm not known in that world. So I also know that, we can get pigeonholed in the types of formats of work that we do. And I'm not gonna come up for a feature film unless it's somebody, like John asked for me to do that. And so I was really fortunate because of that. And I think the only way I will work on, episodic or feature length projects is if it's by way of my SNL connections.
Mm.
And that's fine too, because there'll be some grace given.
Look, a mutual understanding.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time. This was a really fantastic conversation. It's an amazing thing to be a part of something that is so tied into our shared culture in America as Saturday Night Live. And it's always a thrill to see sort of what you all are able to dream up in such a short amount of time. So bravo for all of your work, to you and your team, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking with you.
That brings us to the end of our conversation today. I'd like to give a shout out to my co-producer, Gavin Mosier, and the composer of our original music, Nathan Avakian. As a reminder, if you enjoyed today's program, please consider taking a moment to rate the podcast and subscribe for upcoming episodes. Until next time, stay creative, and thanks for listening.